Hi, John Morgan here with Bob's Market and Greenhouses, and welcome to this week's episode of Bob's Live, our weekly show recorded right here on the internets. So let's get started today by a little bit of an announcement. It sort of is. It's just a little change.
You have a new email.
And I forgot to mute my computer, so let me do that. Anyhow, we are now able to transfer our Ustream videos over to YouTube. So we've created a new channel just for them. So each week on Friday, you can now watch our Ustream show on YouTube. So that's something that's kind of cool that I've just now got set up. So now let's take a look at the weather forecast. And I'm trying to adjust some audio right now, so there we go. Anyhow, let's take a look at the weather for the Mid-Ohio Valley. This weekend, it's going to be awesome outside. Tomorrow, it's going to be nice and sunny, a few clouds around, but not a chance of rain in sight, up in the mid-80s. And then Sunday, it's going to be even prettier. High around 86, almost full sun all day, just beautiful. And next week is actually shaping up to be about the same. Moving on into Monday and Tuesday, there's a little bit of a threat of a thunderstorm on Monday, a little bit more on Tuesday. But overall, the threat of storms are pretty low. And then in Wednesday, there'll be a little bit more of a lingering chance of a storm. But then on Thursday, we're going to be back to wall-to-wall sun and beautiful weather. Let's take a look at the national forecast and a couple weather maps. Tomorrow's forecast, again, pretty much all over the whole U.S., just beautiful weather. It's going to be a great day to get out and work in the garden, work in the flower beds. I know last weekend on Mother's Day, it was a little bit rainy. Well, a lot rainy. But this weekend, it's looking great. And since we're going to be having all that sun, the UV index is pretty high for this weekend. So if you're going to be outdoors working, make sure you put on sunscreen. And let's take a look now at my favorite part of the show, the allergy forecast. And my hay fever has been killing me recently. And that's because grass pollen is number one on our list this week. It has the highest pollen concentration for our area right now. And overall, the allergy scale is at a 7.9. So that's kind of a little bit midway on the scale. Our scale goes from 0 up to 12. So 7.9, it's in the medium to high range. And if we take a look at a few maps showing the national distribution of pollen, for grass pollen, it's getting up there in our region. And if you look to the west, out through Ohio into Indiana and Illinois, it is really high. And, all of our weather comes from that direction. So the winds are just carrying that pollen directly toward us. And tree pollen, it is pretty high too. And you can see now that most of the concentrations of high levels of tree pollen are up to the north of us. Most of the trees in our area are finishing up blooming for spring. So it's interesting to kind of watch this as a time lapse over a few months because the concentrations are really high in the south and then it just moves up through to the north. So our main pollen concerns right now are, of course, grass and tree pollen. Mold spores are also kind of high right now. So if you're allergic to mold, Because of the wet weather that we had last weekend, the mold spore count is also pretty high in our area. Now I want to take a look at something new that I've added this week, and I might add it in periodically. I don't think it's something we could do on a weekly basis because it doesn't change for a few month period. But that is a garden outlook. Basically, what's happening with soil moisture levels and what temperature-wise is good to plant right now in our area. So if we take a look at a couple maps, this first one is soil moisture. And I've just got our region of the U.S. here highlighted because if you look at it, the Mid-Ohio Valley, West Virginia, western West Virginia, and southern Ohio, we're highlighting green, and that's above average soil moisture. So our soil's really wet right now. And believe me, I was out in my garden last night working, and I went in barefoot because it was just too muddy to wear shoes. I didn't want to ruin my shoes. But yeah, garden soil right now is really wet. If we take a look at a map of what is good as far as growing right now, we're in the corn and bean area. Farther down to the south, great tomato growing temperatures. And then up to the north of us, we've got, more toward the spring type crops. So we're getting there as far as soil temperatures warming up enough to be able to plant tomatoes and have them do well. But right now, it's great for corn and beans. And in fact, that's what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. This week in our e-newsletter, we talked about creating mixed containers. And instead of going out and filming a how-to video on this, I decided to kind of wing it and do it right here today. So earlier today, I went out and got some example plants. But basically, in the newsletter article, I talked about a method called fill and spill, which, to think about it, fill and spill, what am I doing? Filling up the pot and then spilling it? What does that mean? Basically, it means that when you create a mixed container, you want to create a mix that will fill up the container and also spill over the sides. And also, to some extent, you want to add height into the container too. So I got some examples of plants that'll work for each of those scenarios. So let's start off with height. What can you add to a container that will give you height? And probably the classic choice are spikes. Spikes, they grow nice and tall. You can stick them right in the middle of the container, and it kind of creates that focal point that draws your eye down and toward the container. And they're a really easy plant to care for. Along with spikes, another popular height type plant are things like caladiums, and then, oh my, ornamental grasses. There are just tons of grass varieties that grow tall, that work great in mixed containers. Last year at Gallipolis, if you were driving through the Gallipolis area, they used a grass called King Tut. It's just beautiful in the containers. Another good choice for height, if I can get its container out, is coleus. And coleus, not only does it add height, but you also have these beautiful leaves. And this one, it's kind of a burgundy color. But there's virtually every color in the rainbow when it comes to coleus leaves. And the leaves can get pretty big themselves, so they make a really dramatic statement in a mixed container. Next we have, also forgot one. We have the fill next. And there are some plants that, they're kind of hard to categorize. They're kind of in between. And I would say that this one is one of those. It's kind of a tall plant, but it also makes a great fill plant. And that is geraniums. The leaves, they tend to grow kind of low. And then you get the flowers up on the stalks, so it adds a little bit of height to the container. So these are also another great choice. When it comes to filling in, things like petunias work great. Now petunias, it's one of those that can go the other direction. It can also become a spill plant because there's trailing petunias, like the waves. You can plant those in a container and they'll trail down over the sides. This is a pottunia variety, and it tends to be a little bit more upright. So it's more of a fill type plant. Another great choice are impatiens. Of course, you can go with the regular old impatiens that you see out in the garden, or something like a New Guinea impatient. These make another great choice when it comes to filling in around the base of a mixed container. And, I mentioned petunias. We got their little cousin here, Calibrachoa. And they're another one of those that make a great fill plant, but they also tend to spill out over the sides. And that leaves us with 2 plants that I picked up. The shuttle trays hold 8, so I just grabbed 8. Next, let's take a look at strictly plants that create spill. They spill over the side. And of course, the classic choice for that are sweet potatoes, ornamental sweet potatoes. Now this is Sweet Georgia Heart Light Green, and this is one of my favorites because it has that beautiful light green leaves, and they just look gorgeous in mixed containers, especially things that are somewhat up off the ground, where they can really spill down over the sides. And speaking of really spilling down over the sides, you can get into things like, oh, he's tangled up here, Vinca vine. Now this guy, he's already vining out pretty long here. But this is a variegated Vinca vine. And this, it will definitely create a statement hanging down over the side of a mixed container. Especially a hanging basket. If you do a mixed hanging basket, these are just awesome. So, that wasn't the only choices. I just brought a few examples of different types of plants you can use. When it comes to growing mixed containers like this, the sky is the limit. And, I'm a computer guy, and something that I've seen recently that kind of cracked me up was a mixed container that used a computer monitor. So they used a computer monitor there and had, actually it's, looks like ornamental sweet potatoes growing out of it and some flowers mixed in. It might be kind of hard to see there on the screen, but yeah, wherever your imagination wants to go when it comes to both planting the plants and also the containers. I've seen literally everything be used for containers when it comes to planting. A lot of people now are going green. Things like coffee cans make great containers. Yeah, old computer screens. I've even seen planters made out of old computer towers. So yeah, the sky is the limit. But I hope that gave you some ideas, and now you can go out and kind of get your brain going and come up with a mixed container of your own. And of course, that information, it was in our e-newsletter. And to get our e-newsletter, you can text Bob's to the number 22828, and that will register you for our e-newsletter. And well, that finishes up our show.